When we talk about the environmental emergency, our first instinct is usually to look at the natural sciences, right? Things like climatology, biology, ecology. But what if that's only half the story? Okay, let's dive into why this massive global crisis is just as much a social emergency as it is a natural one. I mean, we've all seen images just like this one. Protesters from groups like Extinction Rebellion blocking streets, bringing entire cities to a halt. And their central demand, written right there on that pink boat, is to tell the truth. But what is that truth exactly? What is this emergency they're talking about? So, to really get to the bottom of it, who should we be asking? The obvious answer seems to be climate scientists, doesn't it? I mean, they're the ones with all the data, the models, the atmospheric readings, but their work, as absolutely essential as it is, well, it doesn't quite explain the whole picture. To truly get why we're in this mess, we actually need to turn to sociologists. Think about it. If the problem is, as the scientists keep telling us, human-caused, then doesn't it make sense that the people who study human societies are the ones who might have the most crucial answers? So, let's start with a core concept. To get to the root of the problem, we first have to understand that our whole idea of nature, it isn't some fixed permanent thing. It's actually a human invention. This timeline really shows how much our definition of nature has shifted over time. Back in the 14th century, nature was seen as this active, powerful force that literally directed our lives. Fast forward to the 19th century, and suddenly it's this passive, separate thing. A landscape, a pretty scenery to be either admired from a distance or conquered by industry. And now, well, more recently, we've started using the term the environment, which basically frames it as the background setting for human life. And this painting just perfectly captures that 19th century view. As industrialization and urbanization exploded, more and more people moved into cities, away from the land. Nature became something out there, totally separate from society. And this created a really powerful and pretty problematic divide in how we think. This divide gave rise to this incredibly powerful idea that sociologists call human exceptionalism. It's basically the belief that our technology and our intelligence make us special, that we're somehow exempt from the laws of nature that govern every other species on the planet. We believed we could overcome any obstacle, tame any wilderness. This idea is a really critical piece of the puzzle. Okay, so now let's see how this way of thinking really snowballed into the crisis we're facing today. We're going to use global warming as our main example to trace the social roots of what feels like a purely natural problem. Look, the science on this is just crystal clear. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has shown this unmistakable warming trend ever since the 1950s. And when they run their complex models, the warming we've actually observed can only be explained when they include human factors. They've concluded it's extremely likely, which in scientific terms is over 95% certainty, that we are the cause. So the whole point is captured in this term, anthropogenic climate change. Anthropo means human, genic means created. So it's literally climate change that is made by humans, a direct result of our social and economic activities. So where does all this stuff come from? Well, this chart of EU emissions gives us a super clear picture. It's not some abstract, mysterious force. It's our energy systems, it's our transportation networks, our industries, even our own homes. These are the engines of our modern way of life, and it turns out they're also the engines of climate change. And this connects directly to our consumer culture. We live in what's been called a throwaway society. And the just sheer volume of waste we produce, like you can see in this landfill, is a physical manifestation of our economic system, a system that's built on constantly buying more and then throwing the old stuff away. All right, so if the problem is social, how do sociologists go about studying it? Well, they offer two really powerful lenses for looking at the reality of environmental issues. So on the one hand, you've got social constructionism. This approach focuses on the narrative. It asks questions like, how does something even get defined as an environmental problem in the first place? Who's making that claim? And how is that story being framed for all of us? Then, on the other hand, you have critical realism. This approach accepts the physical reality of the problem and then digs deeper, combining social and natural science to find the underlying causes, the actual mechanisms that are driving the issue. So this brings us to the most important question of all. If the problems are social, what are the solutions? Well, unsurprisingly, they have to be social too. But yeah, it's not simple. Global inequality is a massive hurdle. As this quote highlights, developing nations argue that their survival emissions, for basic stuff like electricity and industry, can't be treated the same as the luxury emissions that come from the developed world's consumer lifestyles. This tension makes getting global agreements incredibly difficult. And then there's this huge psychological barrier, which is perfectly captured in what's called the Giddens paradox. Basically, since the dangers of climate change aren't immediately visible in our day-to-day lives, we just don't feel that sense of urgency to act. But the paradox is, by the time the effects are tangible and terrifying, it'll be too late to stop them. Which leaves us with this final thought. We spend so much time talking about how to fix the environment, how to change the climate, but maybe, just maybe, the real challenge, the one that underpins everything else, is figuring out how to change our societies, our economies, and ultimately ourselves.